When I was younger, I went to my first ever car show, and I was probably around 8 or 9 at the time. But to be honest, I'd never seen cars like that before. There was Corvettes, Mustangs, there was even Dodge Vipers, and weirdly enough, my first ever dream car, a DeLorean, a DMC-12. And I was just completely and utterly blown away. I mean, living in the UK, you don't normally see American cars, but I just remember they had so much aura. I mean, obviously the V8s just sound fantastic, and they all looked great, and I'd never really seen cars like this before. It was kind of my first introduction to the car world as a whole. And I definitely feel like there's a certain point in every single car enthusiast's life where there is that certain moment, and you may not realize it at first, but you basically become a car enthusiast. Well, you start to become one. There is a lot of learning to do from that moment. However, it's one of the reasons why I've made this video, and I know a lot of you who watch my content are already car enthusiasts and know the car community pretty well. So please feel free to put some pointers and some advice in the comments below for the people who are new to the community, because I know there is still a chunk of people who watch my videos who may not be particularly into cars and want to learn more. One thing I would like to stress though before you do consider this as a hobby is cars are very expensive, and it will drain your bank account at times. Don't get me wrong, some cars are cheaper than others to maintain and buy, but still, just know that the hobby you're about to get into can be very expensive sometimes. Now, the first thing you want to do if you're new to the car community is basically just do as much research as possible. You'll do this without even thinking online, but the hard part is actually finding car meets to go to and car shows. Car shows are definitely a good place to start because they're really easy to find, even though you do have to pay for quite a few of them. But it's a good way to actually go and see some cool cars and speak to some car enthusiasts. But there is one mistake people do make when they're new to the car community and they're visiting their first few meets or their first few car shows, and that is basically being a know-it-all. The thing is, when you start out, you're not gonna know everything about cars. Look, I mean, at the end of the day, if you're gonna make things up about cars around people who know a lot about cars, they're gonna see right through it. And it's okay to ask questions. I mean, just ask as many as possible, even if they're the most simple questions, you know, but just don't point at an alternator and call it a turbo. Just try and soak in as much information as possible. I mean, my dad has always been into cars, so luckily I had him to help me out when I was first learning about everything. However, the best way to go about it is getting involved with the car community as much as you can. So don't be afraid to ask questions and about people's cars. And if there's one thing a car enthusiast loves more than anything, it's talking about his own car. After building a bit of knowledge up about cars, you tend to now start to realise what kind of cars you're into. These are almost like car subcultures, it's the only way I can really explain it. And a lot of car enthusiasts tend to stick by their one brand or their one subculture. For example, you've obviously got, I would say, one of the most popular subcultures, which is the JDM scene. You've got brands like Nissan, Toyota, obviously the Skyline, the Toyota Supra, the RX-7, and there will be people who only like them kind of cars, and they will just stick to JDM or just Japanese cars in general. Whereas you may have people who just stick to the Euro scene, which are car brands like BMW, Porsche, Audi. You get the gist. I would say most car enthusiasts tend to like all subcultures. I mean, I know I do personally. I kind of float about between each one, even though I would say my preference is probably more JDM, but I love Euro and I love American muscle and American sports cars. But there are some people who will religiously stick to one brand, or they'll religiously stick to one subculture, and this will likely heavily influence your first project car / enthusiast, just any car in general really. And this is where I would probably advise you to do the most research. I really can't stress enough how important it is to research the car you're going to buy, because if you make the wrong decision, it could be a very, very expensive mistake. For example, if you go out and buy a Mazda RX-8 as your first project car, or an old RX-7, which, if you don't know, they both can be very unreliable cars and are not the best on fuel, and you're completely new to working on cars, you're completely new to the car scene in general, that kind of purchase may really ruin your experience of being a car enthusiast and will likely just cost you way too much money and way too much hassle. Whereas something like a Toyota GT86 or a VW GTI might be a really good option for a first project car. And obviously a Mazda MX-5 if it's not too rusty. So definitely do your research, but obviously still get something that you like and you're still going to enjoy. My personal suggestions for your first project car would most likely be a Mazda MX-5 or Mazda Miata, depending on wherever in the world you're from. You can pick them up for pretty cheap, and there's loads of different generations to choose from. They're quite reliable and they're really fun to drive, but the one thing is you do have to watch out for rust. However, if you're looking for something a little bit more practical, with more power and probably, if not more reliability, I'd probably say a Honda Civic Type R, or maybe even a Honda Civic Si. My first car was a Honda Civic, and it gave me no problems at all in the 4 years of ownership. And if you're looking for something a little bit more European, I would definitely go for something like a VW Golf GTI, or even a BMW 1 Series. I mean, there's so many great options out there. However, of course, this decision is completely up to you, but just remember to do your research. One thing I cannot stress enough when you finally buy your first car or your first project car, especially your first car, is definitely make sure you're looking after it. I mentioned this in a previous video, but there's a lot of people who don't maintain their cars correctly, and then when everything starts to go wrong, they say it's a bad car. Don't get me wrong, there are still some bad cars out there. However, with the majority of cars, if you do look after them and properly take care of them, they will last. They will last you a very long time. If you drive your car hard, I would recommend changing the oil every 3,000 miles, but most of the time 5 to 8,000 miles is okay. And I would say if you are new to the car community, try to do these things yourself. There's a lot of tutorial videos online, and if you do really get stuck or you're unsure, just call a friend over who knows something about cars. This will save you a lot of money. Trust me, it's definitely worth it. One thing I really cannot stress enough when you do buy your first car or your first project car is to not go crazy with mods. You will go to a car meet and there will be people who have spent a lot of time and money on their car. However, this did not happen overnight. It's like going to the gym. When you first go to the gym, there are going to be people there who have been going for years, and they're a lot bigger and they're a lot stronger. But this took a lot of time and hard work. They didn't just wake up and instantly have 3 years of gym progression. And it's the same for cars. Well, unless you have loads of money. If you've got loads of money and you've got all the resources, then yeah, you could make your dream build overnight, technically. But a lot of the time, if cars is a hobby for you and you're not super rich, there are going to be other financial decisions you're going to want to take first. So don't put all of your money into mods when you first get your car. Enjoy the car stock and also learn what sort of mods you want. You might think you want to make your car a certain way, but a few months later you think completely differently. I mean, there's even been times with my car where I've thought about making it just back to stock. So definitely take your time with this process and know that it does take time. And good mods are a lot of money. The second thing I really can't stress enough about is when it comes to anything to do with safety, do not cheap out. Cheaping out on mods is bad enough, but cheaping out on mods that are related to safety could basically end your life. So I cannot stress it enough. When you're buying things like aftermarket wheels, or if you're setting up a roll cage or anything like that, make sure it's done properly and you do not cheap out, because you could seriously end up hurting yourself or someone else. And of course, you shouldn't cheap out on mods in general, because it might affect the way your car performs. But when it comes to safety, I mean, at the end of the day, that's the most, as boring as it sounds, that is the most important thing. One of my friends bought a cheap aftermarket steering wheel once. I'm pretty sure I've told you about him before. And over time, it just warped and it just ended up looking really weird. It was obviously cheaply made, and over time it warped into a weird shape. So definitely, yeah, just do not cheap out on safety. Overall though, as cheesy as it sounds, just remember to have fun and enjoy the hobby. Speak to the community, go to car meets, go to car shows, work on your car, make new friends. I know it sounds super corny, but it's what it's all about. Through being a car enthusiast, I've made so many new friends, and this channel, which has been really fun as well. If you did find some enjoyment in this video, please subscribe, it really helps. And I'm trying to get to 2,000 subscribers before Christmas, which is probably impossible, but if you subscribe, there is a chance it can happen. And I think 95% of people watching are actually unsubscribed, so please subscribe. It's free and you can always unsubscribe at any time. I make videos like this all the time, so definitely feel free to check out the other ones. And I'm actually hoping to do a little bit of IRL vlog content pretty soon too, with some of my friends and their cars too. and my own car. I mean, I'm hoping to do a lot more mods to the MX-5 in the new year, and just different content in general, really. I'm actually really looking forward to it. So definitely stay tuned, remember to work on your cars, and I'll see you in the next one.